Hello, everyone, and welcome to OHSCA Interviews. I'm Vincenzo Calla, and I'm your host for today's episode. Today, I'm happy to have with me the MPP for Brantford Brant, Will Bouma. Will was first elected in the 2018 election. Prior to his election, he served as Brant County councilor since 2014. He was a member of Brant County Board of Health, the Brant Waterways Foundation, and has volunteered with the local fire department since 2008. He graduated from the University of Waterloo and completed his optometry training in the US, obtaining a Doctor of Optometry degree. Will currently serves as the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Finance. And if you think that Brantford Brant sounds familiar, it's because we had Larry Brock, the MP for Brantford Brant, on last week. So it's the very first time in OHSCA interviews history. It was bound to happen that we have the MP and MPP consecutively coming on week after week. So, Will, great to have you here today. And we're going to start with thanks for your time, and we'll start with the question and answer session. All these questions come from our high school team. So I'm going to start off with the first question, which is a question that I'm sure you get a lot for the past couple of years now, which is how have you effectively been able to listen to your constituents throughout the COVID-19 pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been a real challenge, actually, because your life gets kind of crazy when you first get elected and you spend all of your time going to events. And so you're interacting with people live all the time. And then suddenly we go into this lockdown and it gets a lot more difficult. And so, I don't interact much at all on social media. I find too often people are not themselves when they're on Facebook or Instagram. And so I really love personal one-on-one. As an optometrist, I think I do my best relationship work when I'm in a room with someone and I get to talk to them personally. And that's really what we've been striving to achieve. Now, it's not uncommon for our office to get hundreds of emails or phone calls a day, especially when there's a major announcement. And that's definitely been true through COVID. And yet many, many people are always asking, I want to talk to Will, I want to talk to Will. And so, especially through the break now since New Year's and even before Christmas, I was really spending time on the phone, just chatting with people. And it's not uncommon, and Milan can corroborate this, but I'm probably doing half a dozen to a dozen phone calls a day, and that's over top of all the other things that we do. Committee meetings, because I'm the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Finance. I'm on the Standing Committee of Finance and Economic Affairs, and we're doing all across the province, doing different consultations. And then we just got back together as a committee, wrote a report and approved that, and all those pieces that'll be tabled in the legislature. So on top of all my duties, as someone said, no one in Toronto votes for me. And so I have to stay in touch with the people here. And while it's been difficult, I think I probably had more one-on-one conversations with people over the last 6 months than probably over the last 3 years leading up to that, just because it's really good to be able to have conversations and just be real with someone, even if it's just on the phone.
Well, that's definitely something that I'm sure that you as an MPP, and I'm sure many other MPPs and MPs and councillors, your time as a councillor, can attest to, that obviously you represent people, and listening to them is the best way that you get knowledge of what the people are really feeling and how people feel. I mean, especially our premier, like he said once at a press conference, he's like, I'm pretty sure every person in Ontario has my phone number now. And he works day and night answering phone calls, messages. We know that. He's talked a lot about that. And that's just the personality he has. And it's just important that all representatives listen to their constituents and the people that they serve, whether that's through phone calls, emails. Anyway, it's just really important. And I'm sure that that's a great way that you've been able to use during the pandemic, and something that we luckily do have access to in 2022, being able to get through the pandemic that way. So we're going to go into the second question, which is from Evan in Ottawa, and it's our first election question. Obviously, election is here. So we've been, you're our second MPP this season. We've had some MPPs on last year, but a lot of people are going to notice we have a pattern. We're going to ask some MPPs election questions. So Evan in Ottawa wants to ask, what inspired you to initially become an MPP, and how have you renewed your visions for your community as you run for re-election? So like, what visions do you still have that you still want to continue to work on?
No, I think that's such a great question. And, going back to the other piece too, that you were just talking about, I think the Premier set such an incredibly high standard for accessibility. And even talking to colleagues that have been around a lot longer than I have, none of us as caucus has ever had access to the leader of the party before, the Premier in our case, like we have with Premier Ford. And it's not uncommon if I shoot him a text within 5 minutes, he's calling me, unless he's really, really busy doing something else. But as far as what inspired me to become an MPP, I think chiefly is probably the inability to say no. And when we came to this community and we settled in St. George and I opened my optometry practice, it's so gratifying to be able to make dramatic improvements in people's lives very, very quickly. And, you know, I see that you wear glasses, and I don't know what your prescription is specifically, but if you remember the first time you put on a pair of glasses and everything looked clear, the joy in your eyes, if I was your optometrist and being able to see everything clearly, is what drove me through that. But then settling in town here, it wasn't long before things started happening. And actually, when we were still in Michigan, where I'd gone to school and worked for a few years, I'd had the opportunity to take a community leadership course. And when we came here, I immediately wanted to get involved. And I love the aspect of planning and building communities. And the gentleman who ended up being my ward mate on council actually came by with voter registration paperwork and asked how I wanted to be involved. And I said, well, I'd like to be in planning. And I got on the committee of adjustment for the county of Brant, which most people have no idea what that is, but basically gave me the opportunity to get around the community, get to know a little bit about the municipal act, and to see what people were trying to do and to connect that way. And shortly afterwards, I was asked to join Brant Waterways, and, you know, cleaning up the community and trail building and enhancing access for people to enjoy the natural splendor out this way with the Grand River running through the community. Really, really was a lot of fun. I was asked to join the volunteer fire department, and because it's tough finding people in a small community when people are working, a lot of them outside of the community. And I remember the chief, I said, you know, why would you want me there? And he said, well, because you live here and you work here, so you have an availability that we could use. And it really, being a volunteer firefighter really solidified for me what it is to be an optometrist too, because when we show up at your house or at your vehicle with red trucks with the lights on, you know, you can count on us to know what we're doing. We have the training we need in order to do that. But what we're really trying to do is make a really bad day a little better. And that just, it drove me to improve what I was doing as an optometrist. And then that naturally evolved into being asked to run for county council. And we did some good things there. You know, an agreement for land transfer with the city of Brantford so they could grow, and getting some of our budget stuff really in line for what we needed to be doing, saving for the future on capital infrastructure investment, which may sound boring to most people, but making sure that the money's there for roads and bridges when we need those roads and bridges is very important. And it was really good to see that happen. And from that, I was asked to run for MPP. And so it seems that every time that circle got a little bit bigger, you know, you have your family, you have your community, you have your patient base, you have your county, and then also to be representing the city of Brantford as MPP, it just gets bigger. And I find somewhere along the line, I don't know exactly when or how, but when it dawned on me that whether you woke up this morning in a wonderful bed in a beautiful home and drive a wonderful car, do a great job, or whether you woke up this morning in the gutter, strung out on fentanyl, you're one of my people. And the responsibility that I have to the people that I serve is what drives me. And coming through COVID, when so many people have suffered so much, and yet I'll even say when so many other people have just, if I can say that, done their bit. You know, they've got their vaccine, they wear their mask, they try to follow the guidance as best as we all can, and to see us come through that, having saved literally, and I agree with the Premier, tens of thousands of lives compared to other jurisdictions, is something I'm really proud of. And now to be able to look forward and to look into the future for what Ontario could be, the good plans that we were doing when COVID interrupted what our government was up to. You know, I have just as much energy now, and probably even more, to see our plans through, so that for you and, you know, and for my children and maybe grandkids and great grandkids someday, to leave a community, a province that's better than what we found when we got here. And I know that's exactly what drives the Premier. It's so exciting to be a part of, and I look forward to continuing that work.
Well, especially last week we had Laurie Scott on, your colleague Laurie Scott from Halliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, and we talked about how this election. We'll continue talking about the election in the next couple of questions. This election's really a fresh start for Ontario. It's gonna be the determining election of how's Ontario going forward. And I know that your government did a lot of work prior to the pandemic hitting. Obviously, nobody knew it was coming, but especially when it came to the economy, which with Vasu's question, we'll asking question 4, talking about the economy and really just some of the work that has been done and continuing that work following the election, just to continue building a better Ontario. And there was a great track record before the pandemic, and it's just so exciting to see what's going to happen now as we are exiting, well, hopefully exiting the pandemic, especially as Premier Ford, I guess at the time of this filming, it was yesterday or the other day, he had a press conference talking about the pandemic and starting to sort of exit it, and really strong words and really a lot of encouraging words as well. So I'm sure we're nearing the end and we're heading off to that election now. And that is the perfect way to get into that third question, which is, what is your number one priority heading into the election in June? I know there's party priorities and that sort of thing, but your priority in Brantford Brant, as the Brantford Brant MPP defending your record, wanting to re-elect, what's your number one priority?
No, I think that's great. What I find so amazing of our record through the pandemic, I was just thinking about that. We are building more long-term care beds than have been built in a generation in my community. We have invested in schools in a way that hasn't been done in my community in a generation, all while making sure that the supports were there for individuals and businesses, and the healthcare supports were there to keep people healthy and safe through COVID. And moving in, Brantford General Hospital needs a significant rebuild, and we need a community planning grant from the Ministry of Health in order to move that work forward. We need to make that happen. We're one of the few court systems in the region that doesn't have a unified family court and a Gladue court for Indigenous issues. And those are real priorities for me. I just see that as justice, health, and fairness, education. And on the education piece, we need skilled workers, not just skilled tradespeople. Absolutely, very important to have that. But we need our young people who are graduating from high school to have the tools that they need to be successful in the economy that we're building. And to see, even through the pandemic, that we've seen the return of 300,000 jobs, good manufacturing jobs to the province of Ontario that had been lost over the previous 15 years is so exciting for me. And we need to build on that, because we can't take away the supports that we have for people who need it most and are most vulnerable. We can't take that away. We realize that. So how can we fund and take care of what we've been doing through the pandemic? Because we've spent a lot of money that we didn't have on hand. Well, that's through huge growth. And that's why, the Premier is a business person, but he has such a heart for people. I know he goes to bed every night thinking about the almost 15 million people that live in this province. And to do what's best for the province of Ontario, to do what's best to help it grow, is what drives the Premier. And to be a part of that, to be a part of the changes in the Ministry of Finance, and in conversations with the previous Minister of Finance when I was in the Premier's office previously, on the things that we need to put in place today, even during COVID, that will set us up for success into the future. And to see some of those things happen has been really, really exciting for me. But yeah, the number one priority for me is the constituents whom I serve. And so I continue to advocate for transportation networks and GO service and different ways of getting to those places. And of course, our healthcare system. And it turns out, though, that in every other city in Ontario needs a hospital also. And so to be able to be fair and equitable with access to healthcare and yet still take care of the needs of my community is the priority that drives me forward.
Well, those are all lots of good priorities. I mean, they're all priorities that I know your government's currently working through. And obviously right now during the pandemic, it's hard to sort of bend over backwards. I know the government's already bending over backwards, touching their knee with their elbow, just going everywhere, trying to get as much done as possible. And it's amazing. But like you said, those investments in healthcare and upgrading as many hospitals as you can, those long-term care beds, I'm sure going forward onto every single interview with every single MPP that we're going to have on, I'm sure every single one of them at some point will bring up the fact that the Liberals only bought made 600 and something beds, and your government has made tons and tons and tons more, and they did 614 years, and in just 4 years, less than 4 years now, built thousands of beds. You've added thousands of beds, and it's just so important. And especially said those local issues as well, transportation. I know that Minister Mulrooney is doing a great job expanding transportation, especially in the north. There's lots more. I remember seeing that video a couple of weeks ago of the new highway in the north that the government built. And especially my last point, during the Super Bowl, I saw the commercial of on the local Canadian network, the Building Ontario, the debut of that new commercial of like the trades, like you said, and building infrastructure and that sort of thing. And I'm hearing it all over the place on the television, on the radio now. It's just all that, and it's just continuing to build on that into the next election. So we're going to go on to the next question, which is from Vasu in Ajax, and he has a bit of he sent me a bit of a background to it. So recently numbers came out proving the 2021-2022 deficit is $8.4 billion lower than in Ontario's fall economic statement, with revenues $8 billion higher than expected at that time. The increase of revenue largely coming from taxes as a result of stronger than expected economic activity. But Ontario's GDP increased 1.4% in the third quarter of 2021, still putting it 1.2% pre-pandemic level in the fourth quarter of 2019. So after all that, Vasu wants to ask, as the parliamentary assistant to the Ministry of Finance, how can you make sure that Ontario comes back to pre-pandemic levels of even better when re-elected in this upcoming election?
Yeah, no, it's an absolutely brilliant question, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. I think it's important to remember that we're seeing those kind of numbers in business while we're in the middle of a pandemic, doing everything we can to keep people safe and healthy. And it absolutely reiterates the importance. You know, the Premier always says that government does not create jobs. What a government does is it creates an environment that the actual job creators get busy. And so what it shows is that our investments in easing cost burdens and regulatory red tape for business, for making it easier for businesses just to do business, for the supports that we put in place for businesses through COVID, that has all come back in spades. And, you know, if you want to go back a little bit further, in our spring budget, we, and of course, then the fall budget before that, which was the first budget that was put out by any jurisdiction in Canada through COVID, we laid the foundations for what we're going to do on recovery. And the forecasted deficit in our budget in the spring was actually $31 billion. And we decreased that significantly by the time we got to the fall economic statement. And now we did another $8.4 billion better, which is a testament to the economic strategy of the Minister of Finance. And it's been such a pleasure to work for Minister Bethlen Falvey that, you know, if we make it easier for people to do business, if we give strategic help to businesses to get them moving, that comes back to the province very, very quickly, which goes exactly to what I said before. As we recover from COVID, you know, we need to return, and here's the Premier's words, to make Ontario the economic powerhouse, not just of Canada, but of North America. And we've got a long way to go on that, but seeing jobs coming back and to see the budget that much less. In fact, our deficit now, through the worst of COVID, is less than the deficit that we inherited when we took office in June of 2018. And when you think about that, along with the fact that we've been investing in long-term care, we've been investing in education, we've been investing, well, we have the largest hospital build ever happening in Canada that's kicking off in Mississauga. All of those things are going on while adding 1,000 ICU beds, while getting the staffing up to where it needs to be so that we have the staff in those ICU beds. While making all those investments, we can still see enough economic activity that our deficit can be reduced by another $8.4 billion, speaks to exactly how well that strategy of growth is working, even through a pandemic. And so I think once we get through the pandemic, that growth is just going to explode, and we'll just continue to do that. And that's why, though, you build a hospital bed, you need doctors, you need nurses, you need PSWs, you need everyone else there too. You build a long-term care facility, you need all the staff there too. We invest in businesses moving to my region, all across the province of Ontario, but we need skilled workers to be in those fields too. And so it's through education, it's through colleges, it's through universities, and all those pieces too. And it's actually been such a massive undertaking, but to actually be able to see the fruits of our labors, even through a pandemic, heading into the election this June, has been so gratifying to me.
Well, those are all amazing, really amazing things to think about now, especially going into that election. And what really stands out to me was that I think when the Liberals left, when you came in, I believe the deficit was 14 billion or 16 billion. I'm not sure how much was it?
Yeah,
It was
15,
15,
15 sticks
16.
in my
Yeah.
head. I know.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
something
higher than
like that.
13.
Yeah, definitely higher than 13. And to think that after all that, the government still, I mean, you had a couple years, you had 2018, 2019, some of 2020 to sort of make that back and sort of pay that back, I guess, before the pandemic hit. And to think, as you said, of all those projects that went through during the pandemic and were strengthened during the pandemic, and to think that you're still better than what you were given, even through all this, is just a testament to hard work and really to just something to think about as people go and vote in the election. I know a lot of people, it's easy to say, why should I care what the deficit is? Why should I care how much money the government's in debt for? That's not my problem. But really, it's all of our problems, because that'll only be reflected in taxes and other things that we all love in Ontario. We're all going to be affected by that. So really, it definitely is a testament to hard work, and like I said, something to think about. So we're going to move on to advice to the next generation. We talk about youth involvement in politics more. We ask this to every single person who comes on our show from the very first episode. So we want to ask, what should young high school conservatives do in order to get more politically active, and one piece of advice that you would give them?
One piece of advice: get involved. Volunteer on a campaign. And it doesn't necessarily need to be on a provincial or a federal stage either. Find a councilor who needs that feels the same way on issues as you do, and put some time into that campaign. Knock on a few doors, make a few phone calls, get some experience that way, and get involved in the community. Being able to volunteer teaches you so much about the community, what's important and what's not important. But make the connections. And I have to say, I am just so impressed that there are young people right now who care enough to be involved in that. And I really, really appreciate the work that you're doing, and just the team and the opportunity to be here, because you're doing exactly that. You're being involved, you care, you're learning more, you're asking the right questions. And I just think that's absolutely brilliant. So I think you can just say, do what you're doing, and be a part of it, and gain experience and knowledge. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you also for those kind words. I mean, that's our goal at OHSCA, just get people involved in politics. Even if you're not quite conservative, or if you're not sure where your home is and political home is, and you're just a young high school kid that wants to get involved in politics, you can just get involved. No matter what party you're involved in, get involved in a campaign. If you want to be nonpartisan, like you said, there's the municipal elections coming up in October. October seems far, but it's not that far away. There are plenty of campaigns that you can work on, and provincially, federally, there's plenty of elections going around in the next couple of years. There's plenty of elections, so just get involved and work on a campaign. And it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun to work on a campaign, and the candidates really all, I'm sure you appreciate when you have people on your campaign. The more people, the better, really. And just many hands make light work, right? More people to knock on doors, more people to make phone calls, more people to do lit drops, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, well, it's so encouraging to see young people get involved. And if I can make the case for conservatism, especially in the province of Ontario, I think if you go back, conservative governments are what built this province. The colleges, the universities, the educational system, the healthcare system, so many things, the WSIB system, so many things that we take for granted and that we enjoy today. were put in place, most significant things, and even the science centers and things like that, all built by conservative governments. Now, I will also say conservative politics is a little bit messier. And what I mean by that is conservatives actually care what other conservatives think. You know, we talk about a big tent, but it's so absolutely true. I am so different than so many other conservatives that I meet, and yet we all share different things. But because we actually care about everyone's voice, well, that means all those voices gets heard. And it's like at the family dinner table when everyone's trying to say their piece at the same time. It can be a little loud, it can be a little messy, but we actually do care about what everyone thinks. And we're the only governments that get stuff built, which is why it's exciting to be a part and of this and to be a conservative.
Well, for sure. And I mean, you mentioned that big tent, we like to think we are a big tent, and we are. I mean, and it's just like you said, we're always, I don't like to say this, but we're always struggling to stay afloat. I mean, it's hard to stay afloat. I mean, provincially, it took us a little while to get together, but we went to victory in 2018, and I'm sure federally we'll go to victory sometime soon too. And just overall, just this coming June, we're gonna have to stay united again. I know it's easy to get lost in politics, and oh, what does this person stand for and how that divides us, but we need to look past what divides us and look at what unites us to build a better tomorrow for Ontario. So that is it. Thanks, Will, for joining me. I hope you enjoyed. I hope everybody enjoyed today's interview. You can look for more interviews coming soon. Make sure to follow our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok accounts, Ontario HS Cons, for more info about our next interview and for more great content. Look at our website, ontariohsconservatives.org, to learn more about us, see our projects, and for more great content. And for our YouTube viewers, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell. For our podcast listeners, follow us and stay updated. So we hope to see you all soon.